Greetings once again, my fine fiends, and welcome back to the Vault of EC. Today we're going to be taking a look at the latest in the Fan-Addict EC Artist Library series, and this is 3 for the Money and Other Stories by Jack Kamen. This is volume 31 in the series, and there's a few things about this that are quite notable. So the first thing is, of this collection of crime stories by Jack Kamen, you will notice some significant upgrades to the quality of the reproduction on some of the stories. And the reason for that is that for the first time ever, Jack's son Dean Kamen has allowed original art of his father's from his personal collection to be scanned. And I never thought that I would ever say that the quality of the EC library sets could be improved upon, but here we are. So we're just going to look at one of the stories as an example, but there are multiple examples of this, and you'll probably have fun like I did doing side-by-side panel comparisons. There's a nice piece from series editor Mike Catron explaining what the difference is, and also showing some of the panels as reproduced in the ECA library. So let's look at one. First, let's look at the original comic book, Crime Suspense Stories number 18, and the story Frozen Assets by Jack Kamen. And let's pay particular attention to the corpse in the freezer, and especially the side of the freezer there. He used some kind of, it's like a zipatone or some kind of effect for the side of the freezer there. And you can see how nice and clear it is in the original comic book. Now, let's take a look at the EC Library volume for Crime Suspense Stories that contains Crime Suspense Stories number 18. Let's flip to that same panel and take a look again at the side of the freezer. And it's come out kind of like a splotchy mess. And for years, decades even, I and many other EC fans thought that this was the result of maybe rubber cement showing through on the original art, or even perhaps deterioration of the original art. Those, whether it was effects created by zipatone or whatever he was using, that it had deteriorated, and that resulted in that splotchy look. So let's take a look at it now in the new collection, 3 for the Money. And just like in the original comic book, look at the side of the freezer again and how nice and clear that is. That's just one example out of many, many examples that I could show you from this book where we actually have improvement to the quality of the reproduction based on the fact that the original art was scanned for this collection. So that's just one of the things that make this, in my view, a must-have. Another is that Dean Kamen, Jack's son, also allowed the use of a self-portrait of Jack Kamen that has never been published before, and that appears in here exclusively for the first time. I think the upgrades to the art quality and the self-portrait of Jack almost make this worth the price of admission alone. But in addition to all those Kamen crime stories, you've got a fantastic introduction by Max Allan Collins. And I like to say that if I'm not going to write the introduction, Max Allan Collins might as well. So who better to write about crime stories than such a famous crime writer as Max Allan Collins? This is the first volume in about 3 years that I didn't write the introduction for, but I got to hand it to Max. It's a fantastic introduction for this collection. In addition to that, you've also got some stories by Sid Check and Fred Peters, and a lot of people have asked, how are you going to reprint all the stories in these art-eccentric volumes? So if you're focusing on individual artists, as in this case Jack Kamen, how are you going to reprint all the EC stories? And that's how they're going to do it. Any artist that doesn't have enough to warrant his own volume is featured as bonus material in other volumes. We've already seen that in previous volumes in this series. And so in this one, the only exception for Sid Check is one story that was already in a Feldstein volume of science fiction stories. Otherwise, the complete EC stories of Sid Check and Fred Peters are in this book. And the Fred Peters stories include the only appearances of a reoccurring story host other than the Ghoul Lunatics. So I'll let you discover that for yourself as well. As you can tell, there's a lot to dig into here. There's a lot packed into this little volume, and I've been spending a lot of time with it. I'm sure you will too. Make sure you get your pre-orders in. You should have it in your hands by Halloween. And thanks again for watching EC Fan-Addict.